The Australia of 1900 is barely in living memory. However, Beatrice Hill, at 92, had vivid memories of Sydney when Penny Crittall spoke to her in Perth in 1985.
Oh, it was wonderful. Wild as wild. I can remember, see, there was no bridge in Sydney at that time, and it was just right from where we over going down Argyle Street down onto the wharf was hardly made, and you'd go right around to Dawes Point.
Beatrice Hill, remembering the Rocks area of Sydney in 1900. Beatrice was only 8 at the time.
The quarters we lived in down on the rocks at those times, it was 80 years ago, was very derogatory. We never associated with anyone that lived around the rocks. There was the Orient Hotel, the ASN Hotel, which we had, and up the street again on the corner of Playfair Street was the Lloyd's. Well, I know I had my 9th birthday there, and of course the old Chinese cook said, well, who's coming? I said, I've asked the people from White's, and we asked the Orient children to come over. Anyhow, the day of the party, White rang up to say they couldn't come down because there was a violent sickness in the place. And of course the Orient ran up and said, well, they couldn't come over because they were not allowed out or to mix with anyone on account of the sickness. So of course I didn't know what to do. So we had a big bell that we used to ring when it was meal times. So I went out in the lane, the big door with a little trap door, and I stood out in Argyle Street and rang this bell, and heads popped out of all the doors. Little boys, oh, cheeky little monkeys they were, real hooligans. And I beckoned one down. I said, I'm having a party. What about coming down and having... Oh, yes. How many can we bring? Well, I said, bring about 10. They collected 10 wild boys. They came down. They were very nice, though. Yes, sis, and no, sis. Anyhow, the cook had made some lovely little cakes. We had raspberry and lemonade. Anyhow, when they were all devoured up, the boys said, we better be getting home now, sis. There's nothing left. I didn't know their names and they didn't know mine. Anyhow, Jimmy, our cook, came out with another couple of plates of cakes and said, well, take some home, one each home to your mum. And so they did, off they went. Well, next morning there was a terrible upset about the sicknesses in the street. The bubonic plague was in the top hotel. That's why they couldn't come.
But the Sydney Harbour Bridge put paid to dreams of the hotel business. The hotel and the land were reclaimed for building. And finally, the family returned to the west on the Orisaba. The fare was $30, and the journey was a nightmare.
On our way, we ran into a storm on the Bight, and we were 5 days anchored in the Bight, just bobbing around, like the song Bobbing Around, you know. Anyhow, we were stealing bananas, and we all got very ill. In fact, we lost one child. She died, and the captain made us come and watch her buried at sea.
Why did she die?
With the bananas. We just wondered we didn't all die eating green bananas and seasickness on top of that again. We got castor oil till I couldn't look at the bottle of castor oil after that.
And back in the west, they searched for the elusive gold, living in the bustling makeshift mining towns with names like Kew, Day Dawn, Mount Magnet, Grant's Patch.
And we went up then to a place called Peak Hill, which is a long way up on the Murchison, and that was an exciting kind of a place. There was nothing in the place but mining, and of course there was again the theatre with as much as we could do, the concerts they were, and they were mainly, the main people were Mohammedans or Afghans. There was one Sayyid Muhammad, he was the head of the Mohammedans there, and he had a most beautiful double-hump white camel, a beautiful thing, and the trimmings on it used to be like wool tied in knots like lattice work hanging down the shelves, and he would get on that and he would ride around. He was just a monarch, and every time which it was that they had to pray to Allah, they had one hill swept. They would all go up and pray to Allah, come back again. Anyhow, one day we were down the street, which was only over the road, as the saying is. There was no streets really. And this Sayyid Muhammad, he was off his camel was rested down. Said, would you children like a ride on my camel? Oh, this was a beautiful. Anyhow, we got on the camel and he led it down home. Well, we thought we were the greatest children in Peak Hill if we had a ride on this camel. But anyhow, there was an accident on the mine, a very nasty accident, and they arranged a concert, which, thanks to the Mohammedans, they were absolutely wonderful with paying out their money. They took the first 4 front seats, or forms they were, and of course we put on all the shows that we could. My sister and I were saying, "Tell me, little maiden, are there any more at home like you?" Do you remember that? "Tell me, pretty maiden, are there any more at home like you? There are a few, kind sir, but simple girls and proper too. Now tell me, pretty maiden, what these very pretty girls do. Their manners are perfection and the opposite of yours."
Schooling was mostly home tuition. Or sometimes there was a school, but sometimes there wasn't. And the schools were usually run by the church. They ranged from the large and the well-established to the, well, somewhat makeshift.
I came to school in Calgary many years ago, and Sister Dominic, she taught. Well, we lived on the Ben Lomond lease, that's at the halfway between, too far for us to walk into school. There's no conveyances at all. And the 2 nuns used to drive out in a trap. And there was a big tree and a fallen log. And that was our school. We'd sit on this fallen log and have all our schooling there. But there was a very, very funny thing. The houses were built anywhere at all on this lease, anywhere. You know, there was no streets. Just like on the leases of the mine. And the toilets were always stuck out that everybody knew that was the toilet. Well, they used to make them, and the seats and all, they were all together. You pick them up and carry them, because there's only a hessian around, and a hessian door with a stick in the bottom to keep it down. Well, this one day, there was a man at the toilet, and there was a willy-willy coming. We were all watching this willy-willy direct for his toilet. Up went his toilet, and he went with it too, you see, because he had nowhere to stand. And anyhow, he was just dumped down, not even thrown over. But there was no mess around about. But he got down, he pulled up his pants. Oh, that was a near slip for him that he wasn't killed, you know.
After school, the kids played. They went on picnics, made their own fun. There wasn't much housework in a bag house. That's a wooden frame covered with hessian and then waterproofed with a mixture of whitewash and dripping. And kids will always get into trouble. Beatrice was no exception.
One occasion I stole a little black baby and brought it home, dressed it up, bathed it first and dressed it up in my doll's clothes. And by the nightfall, of course, there was the devil was going, that's calling out a war, you see, of blacks upon the whites. And my father said, "Something serious has happened, I better go out and see what it is." It was just at the foot of the hill. Went over and he asked some of the Aborigines what it was. "Somebody stole a baby." And of course Dad didn't know, it was asleep. I filled it up with milk and it went sound asleep. But where I found it, there was Subi Horsai. She was a Japanese woman, she had a brothel right out in front of everybody. And of course this Aboriginal woman was doing her laundry work, and this baby in a robe crying its eyes out, and I just went and brought the baby home. And of course always had a bottle for my dolls, and I filled it up with milk and gave bath first and powdered it, and dolls for it, and put it into bed. It never woke up, you see, but crying. Dad didn't know. Dad just come in fustering around when he went home. There's been an Aboriginal baby stolen. And I said, "No, it isn't stolen, Dad. I've got it. It's not stolen. Get out there and give it to the Aborigine and tell him you're sorry." He made me go straight up to this furious man. I took the baby because it was crying. And I gave it to drink of milk, and he looked at it and tore the dress off. And of course, the white powder on, he rubbed the dirt on it, you know. And, oh, he could have killed me there and then, but I was honest enough to come and tell him that I took the baby.
And in their long journeys from one small mining town to the next, the family travelled. They travelled by donkey team, they travelled by camel team, they travelled by rail, and best of all, by the Cobb and Co coach.
The last Cobb and coach, my sister and I, we were coming from Sandstone to Lenora. And George McGowan was the driver. I think this was about the last coach too, because they were doing away with them then. Motor cars were coming in. Well, McGowan said, we have to go before daybreak. And my sister and I wanted to sit on the front box seat, they called it, with the driver. And I suppose there was 6 inside. Anyhow, we were going along. It was such a heavy morning, a very, very heavy morning. And he said, I think we're going to run into a storm. Well, we were going along to daybreak. It was beautiful. All the cockatoos coming out, and chipping away and all. It was really lovely. And we just got onto the Iron Knob. Then we had been singing to our heart's content coming. It was really beautiful. And anyhow, we were all got drenched in here. We had to get down the hill, and of course the water was flowing very fast then. And he said, we have to camp. We can't make the stage, they used to call it, where they changed horses, you see. He said, we can't make the stage. We'll have to feed the horses here in the rain and hope that it'll fine up, which it did. And when it fined up, he said, we've got nothing to eat. We didn't have. So he said to my sister, the rabbit burrows were there, He said, you sit over there on that one, and if you see a rabbit come out, hit it on the back of the head with this stick, and he gave her a heavy stick. And he said to me, you sit this side, little mounds, they were about as deep as this house, I suppose, and make a noise and rattle a tin, and they'll run out, you see, away from the noise. Anyhow, we got 2 rabbits. He killed them, skinned them, and washed them in the running water. And I don't know how we got fire going, but we got a fire going. Whether he always carried wood, in an emergency, I don't know. But we had bits of rabbit on a stick and cooked it that night. And that's how we ate it. No bread, no pepper and salt in it, but it was just lovely. One of the nicest meals I've had. But that was a marvellous trip. It was exciting all the way.
The scene changes now to the goldfields of Western Australia, where the now married Beatrice Hill faced up to the challenges of mining life and the Depression as well.
My husband had a show out at Orabanda, Grant's Patch really, just a place out of Orabanda. And there was quite a lot of gold found around anyhow. He was getting out a big crushing. And just at the time when all the ore had to be hauled up from below, the men that was working for him and with him decided that they wanted to go into Kalgoorlie and have a good old beer up. So my husband tried to talk them out of it for a couple of days. No, they just decided they had to go in and have a beer up. And they said, well, we'll have it over by the time you get your crushing through, because there was a good lot of crushings ahead of him. So anyhow, he said to me, what will we do, Kate? I said, I don't know anything about it. He said, I think I'll get old Jack Kerr, he said, and he's just almost in the grave, to come and fill the buckets down below. And he said, I can't haul, because he said he wasn't well enough, he had a bad heart. And he said, I'll fix up something. So overnight he said, I've fixed up something. He fixed up a rope that went around the barrel of the hauling thing to a wheel, and attached down under another little wheel and stuck on the back of my car, of the axle. And he said, I want you to drive 175 feet forward, back 175 feet. I said, how long have I got to do that? Well, he said, 7 hours a day. I said, all right. These men had gone off and left him. Old Mr. Kerr said, well, you've got a little trolley. I can put the bucket on that and fill it up with dirt and push it on. I just took it on. That's not very hard work, but it's too hard for me. Anyhow, I did that. I would come forward and there'd be a big dong on the a lump of iron hanging down. I'd have to stop dead. 2, would I go back 3 feet. The bucket would be unhooked off the rope that was bringing it up from below and emptied and put back on again. Another 3 foot over and dong again, then back. I do that until morning tea time, and then would go on, hop along there now up and get the cup of tea ready, and I'd have to shoot up to the camp. And of course the kettle would be, or at least the billy can would be boiling on the side. We had a flat iron on the side of the fire. And pop the tea in, and he could sort that all out while I moulded a couple of loaves of bread and put in the camp oven and put that on. That would be cooked in an hour and a half. When we came back for lunch, we'd go back and work until lunchtime and come over and do the same again. And that continued on for 7 days. And by the time I was finished, when I stood up, I was going forward and backward. I couldn't steady myself for quite a time. But we got the crushing through. Another time that the same men did the same thing of the crushing. See, there's sometimes there's 16 or 17 ahead of you, and if you miss your turn, then you go right back again. Anyhow, this time Pops came in. He said, I'm just sick to death of these two men. He said, we'll have to... And he said, I can't get old Jack Kerr. He said, we'll just have to do the best we can. And Tom said, Dad, I'll go down the mine. He said, what can you do down there? He said, I can fill the buckets. Yes, he said, but you can't do it alone. He said, there's got to be two down there and one up. Anyhow...
How old was he?
He was about 15. And I thought, well, if we can go down, I can go down. And I'm scared of depth or anything like that. So I put my husband's tussar silk pyjamas, suit on, and tucked them in his big woolly socks. And these little flour bags, we used to get 7-pound bags of flour on my head right down. Down I went. And I said, I'm going down here now, and I'll be here till 4 o'clock, because I'm not coming up again and going down again. So anyhow, that's what we did. We filled the buckets and sent them up, and Father emptied them. And he would go down when we finished up and bore the holes and fire out again, ready for the morning for us. But I stayed down there. They'd send me down a billy of tea, a few sandwiches. I wasn't game. I never looked down the shaft. I wasn't game to look down, or I'd have fallen down. Anyhow, we got that through, and that was not much of a success, but it was very, very pleasing to know that we were able to do something like that. And another thing, this doesn't concern us, but there was another man. He was just down the way from us, and he said to his son, I must go down and fix all that dirt up down there, Bernie, for you to go down and shovel it into the buckets and bring them up. And when he went down, he lit the candle, and of course they never had any. It worked with the candle, and it sticks into the wall, you know. Anyhow, he just stand and go shh past him. He said, "No, what on earth is that?" But he got an awful fright. Anyhow, he didn't know, and he struck him back. Shh again, with this awful splash again. And of course, whatever object was, that fell into the water. It was 50 feet of water at the bottom. And old Mr. Hancock fell in also. Of course, he was just sensible enough to grab the ladders and sing out, Bernie, "What's the matter, Dad? I'm in the water and I can't move. Will you come down?" So he said, "Well, just stay where you are and don't let go." And he went down and he tied a rope around his father's underneath his arms, and of course over his shoulder. And as he walked up, the father took the steps up again. And when they got the father up there and settled down steadily, he went back to find out what it was, a big kangaroo. But how that kangaroo fell down the shaft and got onto a landing, I don't know, because instead of going straight down, he shot off into something.
Obviously, Beatrice didn't spend all of her time down the mines in her husband's tussar silk pyjamas. The next story is how she lost one of her best dresses, which doesn't seem a serious affair until you remember that during the Depression, you didn't have many dresses.
Well, it was Christmas time at Grant's Patch, and I brought the two girls out from school, and they were having a wonderful time out there. We had a lovely old goat, a wild-looking thing with great big horns and wild eyes, but it was such a beautiful thing for milking and that. We had two kids beside that. And the two girls used to make shops out of the petrol tins and all the tins that were used. And of course, the moment they got them all readied up, Nan would charge into them and knock them down again and tear all the labels off them. Of course, this used to upset the girls terribly. And the eldest one at the finish said, "Well, I think the devil's in that goat. I'll have to christen it." Well, she had some holy water that she brought out from the convent, and she christened the goat, but the devil was still in him. He still did those naughty things. And this I must tell you about this frock I had on that she chewed the frill off, a lovely Georgette frock. I had to use the frocks because I had nowhere else to use them, and it was better than buying things during the Depression. And I had Tom on the correspondence, and I was giving him his lessons, spelling and dictation. And he was laughing to kill himself. And I was getting really cross with him as I was making the bread. And every now and then Nan would bunt me in the back, and I'd throw another little bit of dough or flour to her, so that'll satisfy her. Went on like that. And at the finish, I said to Tom, "Now I'm going to smack your ears if you just don't stop laughing." He said, "I can't help it, Mum." I said, "Why?" He said, "Feel the back of your dress." And Nan had bitten the whole back out of my frock. And I was thinking she was wanting more flour than that.
Was it really hard in the Depression? Were times really bad? Was
it more than bad. It was really, it was terribly sad. See, before I went on to goldfields, I used to work for the unemployed. And, you know, we'd have so many parcels to give out. There might be 70 parcels, and then this person would have one child, this would have 3 children. You had to pick out for that. Well, we had one butcher, and that was Woodthorpe's in North Perth, and they used to get the meat there and cut it up into, I would give them the order, so-and-so, so many children, and they'd cut according to them. We'd bring home, and everything was given. There was the butter, there was the milk, there was the bread, vegetables, and we'd sort it all out and deliver these parcels. Some people accepted them, you know, very kind and that. Others, it was a terrible, terrible embarrassment. There's one poor people, well, they couldn't. They wouldn't open the door when they knew we knocked on the door and we put the parcel down. Whether they ever took it, I don't know. But they were so embarrassed to think that they were having to take charity like that.
How did people make
anything at all? The government, now Melvester Park, you know that in Netherlands now, well, that was a bush. And they were clearing that bush, and they got 6 shillings a day. They went on some rail, I don't think it was the Avon Valley Railway that they were doing. And they would, one of those big railways there, and some of the men that never worked hard, for office men, working there with blisters on their hands, and they'd go and take the 6 days, you know, working, come home with bleeding hands, to a mere nothing at all. It couldn't be helped, you know. Others would go out fishing. Would they do any mortal thing at all? Anything. Others wouldn't.
Everybody was involved during the Depression. Everybody was affected by national and international events. And on the goldfields, as all around Australia, everybody helped.
About twice a week. We used to make a big fire outside, and we had some beautiful records on our gramophone. We'd play those. It was really lovely, you know. The wildcats used to come, and you could see them there, their shiny eyes and that, you know. And all these boys, some are managers of firms down here, and they would come and sit around. They'd bring their little bit of tea and a little bit of sugar if they wanted, and their potato or their onion, and pop it in the fire. That would be their supper. If I had any damper, well, I'd give them a bit of damper, but they never encroached on you for a mouthful of food. It was really wonderful. Well, we had a bad time. You see, we eventually had to sell our home, but that was selling shares and getting nothing for them. One occasion we sold $65,000 worth of shares, not fully matured. I gave them to a stockbroker in Kalgoorlie, and he said, "What is your reserve, Mrs. Hill?" I said, "My husband never said anything about a reserve, and I don't know anything about a reserve." I said, "Get the best you can." The next day he rang me up, he'd sold the lot, and I was thrilled. That's lovely. £22.15. Well, I just sat and cried.
Beatrice Hill, now living in Perth, with memories of the Depression on the Kalgoorlie goldfields.